As soon as the recording starts, we'll start. All right, furry friends. Two of you did not answer the question from yesterday. If that's you, you better hop your little self on and finish that question. Okay? If you did not answer from the question yesterday, you better fix it real quick. Okay? Okay. All right. So, oh snap, it's just, man, I just love this book so much. I think it's so good. Remember, we ended with Mr. Bud freaking hopped in the guy's car trying to drive it away because he saw there was blood in the back seat and he's like, oh snap, I gotta go. He's got to go. Does anyone want to tell me, like, why do you think it says contains human blood? Like, anyone want to give me like a prediction there? Like, why do you think that's in his back seat? Is there really blood in it? I don't know. Hannah Druber, do you want to unmute yourself and tell me what you think?
He could be like a vampire or something.
Okay. Vampire. Maybe he there's some cannibalism. That's when you like eat humans, which obviously none of us are. But that is a real thing. Maybe he's a cannibal. I don't know. Nikilan, what do you think, bud?
I think he might be a doctor, or maybe
That's a
just a
good.
doctor.
Maybe he has something to do in the medical field. Logan just said to scare little kids. Like maybe the box just says that. I mean, Buddy didn't actually, or Bud, sorry, not Buddy. He didn't actually look in the box. Like for all we know, it just says that. You know, sometimes things say things that aren't. You know, maybe the box is labeled wrong. I don't know. All right, I'm gonna get started though. But yeah, he's in the car. He's trying to drive away. Intense. Chapter 11, page 108. The car only went 30 giant steps before it commenced to bucking and finally cut right off. The vampire guy finally caught up with me. He was looking very surprised. He tapped on the window with his knuckle. He said, roll down for a minute, bud. So he's not even screaming at him. He's just tapping on the window. Roll down the window, bud. Like, I mean, if someone was trying to steal my car, I'd be yelling. But he's just like, roll down the window, sir. Sometimes it's terrible to have been brought up proper. I couldn't help myself. I rolled the window down just enough so that our words could get in and out, but his hands or claws couldn't. He said, okay, what's this? I said, don't you think I can read? How come you're carrying real human blood around in your car? I showed him my jackknife. I'ma warn you. I know how to kill vampires. This knife is genuine, solid 24-karat silver. He put both of his hands over his face and shook his head back and forth a couple times. He said, sweet baby Jesus. Why me? So I'm sure Mrs. Kneifel does this sometimes, or I'm sure your parents have, when you just ask yourself, like, oh my gosh, why is this my life? So this guy's literally like, why did I stop for this kid? Oh my goodness, why me? Then he said, Bud, if you were from Flint, I might think you believe that, but you're a Grand Rapids boy. You got to be smarter than that. If I was a vampire, why do you think I got that sandwich and a bottle of red pop? I thought for a second. Then an answer jumped out. Bait. He put his hands back over his face. Oh, wait, hold on. Something came up on my computer. Move. Okay, sorry. This time when he pulled them away, he was laughing. He said, Bud, if I was a vampire, I wouldn't have to catch little boys. I'd just stick my fangs into one of those bottles and have my supper. Besides, where have you ever heard of a vampire that knew how to drive a car? That made sense. In all the moving picture shows I'd seen and all the books I've read about vampires, I never could think of seeing one that could drive a car, but I wasn't going to take any chances. What's a moving picture show? Can someone tell me what that is? This is 1936, and that's what they were called. Type in the chat if you know what a moving picture show is in today's language. Correct. Gage and Rainier had it first. A moving picture show is just a movie. I mean, I could call it a moving picture show, but it's called a moving picture show because back in the day, instead of, like a continuous screen, it would be like a picture of a person with their hand up, the next picture with their person to the hand side, and then down and down and down. So it used to be pictures all shown in a row instead of just a continuous recording. So that's why it's called a moving picture show. So if you knew that, go you. If you didn't, now you do. Could I please see your teeth, sir? What? Your teeth, sir. What's he checking for? Why does he want to see his teeth? Tell me in the chat. Ooh, Rainier, you are speedy on the typing today. Yeah, thanks. He wants to see if he's got any fangs. So he's like, let me see your teeth. The man mumbled something, shook his head again, then leaned close to the window glass and opened his mouth. Even though he didn't have fangs, his teeth still looked kind of scary. They looked like they could bite a pretty good grapefruit-sized chunk out of you. Then he said, Bud, I've got to get this blood to Hurley Hospital in Flint. They need it right away for someone's operation. I can look at you and tell you're far too smart to believe in any nonsense like vampires, son. Be a good boy. Open the door. Okay, we have our answer. So he must, he carries blood. So someone must have donated blood, then he's a carrier for it. So he takes it and drives it from this hospital to the next hospital. Okay, so he's not a doctor, but he is like a carrier. He carries important stuff. I'm not sure how, like blood banks, like the Red Cross, they're the ones who transport blood nowadays. But remember, this is 1936.
So like a messenger?
Yeah, he's like that. He like an Amazon driver, except for he is carrying blood from one hospital to another. Okay. I pulled the lock up for him and scooted over to the passenger side of the car. I unlocked my door just in case he had any tricks up his sleeves. He got in the car and said, "You'll never know how grateful I am to you, bud. I'll take a horrible image of you putting the car in gear to drive away while I stood by the side of the road in Osceola, Michigan at 2:30 in the morning to the grave with me. Thank God you don't know how to drive." "No, sir. But if you'd have showed me some things, I'd have learned real quick." Just in case. I watched the way he put the car in gear, so the next time something like this happened, I know how to make a clean getaway. Me and the man headed back towards Flint, driving over the same road it took me so long to walk. Going like this, I wasn't never going to get away from this doggone city. What the heck? Now he's traveling back to Flint with this guy. We hadn't been driving for a minute before he started asking a whole slew of questions. Questions I had to be very careful about giving the right answer to. He said, "Don't you feel bad about worrying your mother like this, bud, not buddy?" "My mother is dead, sir." "Most times, if you tell an adult, they'll leave you that alone, but not this man." "What? I'm sorry to hear that, bud. So you stay with your daddy?" "Yes, sir." "Right in Grand Rapids?" "Yes, sir." "What's his name? Does he work for the railroad?" "No, sir." The seed started sticking its head out further and further. "His name is Herman E. Calloway, and he plays the biggest doggone fiddle you'll ever see." The man shouted, "What?" I said, "Really, sir? I swear for God, it's the biggest fiddle in the world." He said, "I know your father. Everybody in Grand Rapids does." Okay, so that's a little bit of a pickle. He's lying about, he thinks that's his dad, but we don't know for sure if it's his dad. But then this guy knows his dad, apparently, because remember, he's in this band thing, so he's like a popular person in the area. Like, if you're going to lie about someone being your parent, maybe it shouldn't be someone famous. We don't know if it's his dad yet or not. We don't know that. I didn't say anything. He said, "Well, Albie, at first glimpse, I wouldn't say you look much like Herman, but now that I look at you, I suppose you do. Of course, he's quite a bit bigger, if you know what I mean." This was the best news I'd heard all day. My face nearly split in half from my giant grin. "Yes, sir. Folks say I'm the spitting image of my old man." He started really shooting the questions to me. Blah, 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 blah. He really started shooting the questions to me, so to stop him, I said, "Sir, could I please have the sandwich and the rest of the red pop before I answer any more questions?" He slapped his forehead and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, bud. I was so surprised about who you are and so happy that you didn't drive off that I forgot all about our deal." He handed me the sandwich and the pop and an apple. I was so hungry I forgot about scraping off the mustard off the bologna sandwich. Even like that, it was the best sandwich I ever had in my life. So he's literally so hungry that he doesn't even like mustard. I don't know if that's ever happened to you obviously you're probably not as hungry as Bud, but sometimes you're just so hungry, even if it's not your favorite food, you're like, "Oh my God, I could eat this over and over again." That happens to Mrs. Kneifel, because sometimes Mrs. Kneifel gets hungry. But he said, "My name's Mr. Lewis. Now, if you're about 15, 20 years old, you could call me Lefty, but you're not. So you can't. Mr. Lewis will do just fine." I shoved the part of the sandwich that I was chewing into the side of my mouth so I could say, "Yes, sir, Mr. Lewis, sir." Then he said, "I'm not ashamed to admit it. You gave me a scare here tonight, and I'll never forget. I just know I'll be having nightmares about meeting you for the rest of my life. I'll wake up in a cold sweat many a night with a picture of you in my car pulling away with that blood on the seat." So obviously this must be this guy's job. So if Bud would have drove away with the car, Mr. Lewis / Lefty Lewis, he wouldn't have been able to complete his job. He would have left with the blood, and then Mr. Lewis probably would have gotten in trouble or gotten fired for not being able to deliver the blood. So it's a good thing Bud didn't know how to drive a car. I can see it now. I'll be sound asleep deep in the middle of Dorothy Danridge's dream when all of a sudden I'll be standing on the side of the road in Osceola, Michigan at 2:30 in the morning. I'll be seeing my car and that blood pulling away with nothing of you showing but a little peanut head of yours peeking over the dash. He looked over at me out of the side of his eyes. Anyone ever tell you got a little peanut head? I gulped down the pop I was swishing around in my mouth and said, no, sir. Well, he said, this may be the first time, but unless you undergo some major surgery, I bet it won't be the last. So he's saying his head shaped like a peanut is all. You're going to find out soon that Mr. Lefty Lewis or Mr. Lewis, whatever you want to call him, he's a little bit of a jokester, okay? He's a little bit an ornery old man is how Mrs. Kneifel would describe him. Yes, sir. He waited a second, then sounded kind of disappointed when he said, don't take it so seriously, Bud. I am teasing you, you know. I started in on the apple. Yes, sir. Ever been in the Army, Bud? No, sir. Well, I've got to tell you, I haven't heard so many sirs since I was back at Fort Gordon in Georgia training for the big war. I almost said yes, sir, but I looked at him and guessed he was still teasing. I took another drink of the red pop and saw that when I was raising the bottle, I accidentally let some of the sandwich out of my mouth slip down into the pop. There were a couple of chunks of chewed up bread and a blob of bologna and some mustard swimming around the bottle. The mustard was real pretty. It looked like some kind of magical fog every time I moved the bottle. The mustardy smoke went into a different kind of shape. Lefty Lewis said, how about sharing that pot, Bud? Uh-oh. He took one look and handed it back. He said, nothing personal, Bud. I've raised 3 kids and 2 grandkids. I've learned the hard way about drinking after young folks. But I do believe you need to get in and see a doctor soon, son. It looks to me like you've got some serious backwash problems. That's the most food I've ever seen floating around in a bottle of pop. In fact, it doesn't look like pop anymore. It looks like red stew. I real quick chugged the rest of the pop and ate the apple real slow because I figured as soon as I was done with it, the questions would start up again. Lefty Lewis said, aren't you sleepy? This was perfect. I could pretend I was falling asleep and then come up with some answers that would get me to Grand Rapids for sure. I yawned real big. A little bit, sir. All right. Here. Give me that core. I think the only thing that's left is a seed or 2 anyways. I handed him the apple core, and he put it and the wax paper from the sandwich in the paper bag. You just stretch out there and have some sleep. In about an hour, you'll be in a nice, comfortable bed. We can have our talk in the morning. All right, so apparently he's going to find him a bed to sleep in. That's nice, but do we think Bud's actually probably tired? I mean, he's been walking like this whole entire evening. So he's saying, oh, yeah, I'll just pretend to fall asleep. It'll be fine. But, I mean, he's probably actually tired. And I don't know about you, but Mrs. Kneifel loves a good nap in a car, okay? Sometimes the car just makes you so sleepy. He reached in the back seat and said, here, and handed me a jacket. You can use this for a blanket. The jacket smelled real good, like spice and soap. Lefty Lewis said, oh, but now, buddy, one more thing before you doze off. Could you reach over into the backs and hand me those bottles of blood? I haven't had a bite to eat all day. So look, he's messing with him. Lefty Lewis is such a joker. He's like, oh, wait, before you go to sleep, hook me up with some blood. I'm a little bit hungry, when we clearly know he's not a vampire. I closed my eyes and smiled. I knew I was going to be safe because I never heard of a vampire that could drive a car, and I've never seen one with such a good sense of humor. Besides, I kept my jackknife open under my leg, and he looked like he believed me when I told him it was made out of real silver, even though it probably wasn't. As soon as I had the jacket over me, the smell of the spice and soap and the sounds of crickets and toady frogs outside made my eyes get real heavy. Wow. I must have been real tired. Walking and ducking in and out of bushes between Flint and Osceola was a lot more work than I thought it was. Most of the time since Mama died, if someone even walks close to where I was sleeping, I'm up in a flash. My eyes fly open and I'm looking right at them. At one of the foster homes where I'd stayed, a woman told me she knew I was going to be a criminal because anyone who sleeps that light has got to have a guilty conscience. Most of the time, the sound of someone else going from sleep breathing to awake breathing in the same room was enough to get me up. But this morning I felt like I was at the bottom of a well with someone that had filled a blah, blah. But this morning I felt like I was at the bottom of a well that someone had filled with ton of thick chocolate pudding. Someone was calling my name from way up at the top of the well. She was saying, "Bud, Bud." Waves of the pudding were sliding me back and forth, back and forth. "Bud, wake up, Bud." It was a woman's voice, and her hands were trying to shake me awake. Uh-oh. This is rule 29 of my rules. So he's literally got a rule about everything. Now he's got a rule about waking up, okay? My gosh, this crazy guy. Rules and things number 29. When you wake up and don't know for sure where you're at and there's a bunch of people standing around you, it's best to pretend you're still asleep until you can figure out what's going on and what you should do. I kept my eyes closed, acting like I was out cold. This woman said, "Papa, what on earth are all these lumps and bites on this baby's face?" The man answered, "Well, he was walking all the way from Grand Rapids to Flint. It looks like he provided a pretty paltry meal for every mosquito on the way." This woman said, "This poor child must be dead. I hate getting him up. I wish he could stay with us for a while, at least until he's had his sleep." Okay, so last we heard he was in a car with Mr. Lewis, and now there's some female around too, and she's saying "Papa," so I mean we can assume maybe it's Lefty Lewis's daughter or something. But she happened to notice all the bites on him. And remember, they're not necessarily, there's probably some mosquito bites, but most of them are those hornet stings, remember? So that's why he looks awful. Then I remembered who I was with because Lefty Lewis said, "I know, but I've got to get back. He can sleep in the car on the way back to Grand Rapids." The woman rolled back the blankets they'd put over me and said, "Papa, look at his legs. This boy's as skinny as a rail." Shucks. They'd taken off my knickers when they put me in bed. Now I'm going to have to pretend I was asleep even longer, at least until I could figure out a way of being so embarrassed. So, like his little knickers, those are like his pants. Lefty Lewis said, "Yeah, he's puny. Good thing his legs don't touch when they walk, because if those two twigs got to rubbing against one another, he'd have a fire going in no time." Aha, see? Lefty Lewis making another joke. He's saying his legs are so thin, they're like little sticks. And you know, like if you rub sticks together, they'll make a fire. I mean, you got to rub a long time. But he's like, "Oh, snap, he'll be creating a fire with his little stick legs." You guys aren't thinking this is funny as I am, but I'm telling you, this just cracks me up. The woman said, "That's not funny. He doesn't look like he's been fed right. Now, who's his father again? You said you know him." "Everyone in Grand Rapids does. I'm surprised you can't remember him. He's quite a big fish there. See, I told you it was smart to pretend you were asleep some of the time. Now I was going to learn some things about my father." The woman said, "What kind of man is he that he let this child be so thin? And look at the condition of this boy's clothes. Everything is either too small for him or almost in tatters. Where's this child's mother? There's not much of a woman's touch about him." That means like she can tell, like obviously there's no female taking care of him. Lefty Lewis said, "It seems to me that the Mrs. Calloway I know passed a long time ago. The boy says he's 10. I'm sure she died quite a while before that. But you know how musicians are. There must be at least a few Mrs. Callaways I don't know anything about." That meant that my dad was married to someone before he married my mom. So he's saying musicians, they're not necessarily like a one-woman person, okay? That they might have extra friends, or they get married more than once, they get divorced often, just like in real life celebrities, like they're getting married and divorced all the time. So Lefty Lewis' daughter said, "I think it's a sin. I'm of half my mind to keep this boy for a while to put some fear in his daddy's heart, but he probably wouldn't even miss him." Lefty Lewis said, "Now you stop being so judgmental. Herman's got a reputation for being no nonsense, not mean. Does this child have any brothers or sisters?" "I believe he's got a sister, but she'd have to be his half-sister. She must be full-grown by now." The woman pulled the blanket back over my legs and shook me again. I was glad I could stop pretending I was asleep. I was sick and tired of hearing about how skinny I am and what mixed-up family I come from. She said real soft, "Bud, wake up. Come on, sweetie. I've got a nice breakfast waiting for you." Food. I started blinking and acting like those were the first words I'd heard all morning. I said, "Huh?" Kind of like I was confused. This woman smiled real big and said, "Uh-oh, I see I got your attention, didn't it? Good morning, young man." "Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, Mr. Lewis." He said, "Hey, Remember my name. Oh, wait. He said, hey, you remember my name. I'm impressed. Good morning, Walking Willie. I've got to hit the road in a bit. Better hurry up and get some food into your belly. He acted like he was whispering just to me when he said, the food in this joint ain't the best, but I guarantee after you eat here, you won't be hungry for days. This meal's going to be sitting in your stomach like a rock for a good long time. All right, so he's saying, my daughter's cooking not very good, but hey, at least you'll be full. Once again, Lefty Lewis cracking people up. The woman said, ignore him, bud. My father doesn't mean anything. He just can't stop teasing. I said, I know, ma'am. He told me I got a head shaped like a peanut. The woman slapped her father on the arm. Papa, I can't believe you teased this child already. What is on your mind? Lefty Lewis rubbed his hand over his head and said, look at this noggin. I rest my case. Boy looks like one of George Washington Carver's experiments, sprouted legs and run off. You sure you're not from Tuskegee, Alabama, bud? I said, no, sir. The woman sucked in her lower lip and swallowed a smile before she said, see, bud, he can't help himself. But he doesn't really mean anything, do you, Papa? The way she asked that, you'd have to be pretty stupid not to know how to answer her. Lefty Lewis said, not a thing. It's just that you... His daughter spoke up. My name is Mrs. Sleet, bub. Pleased to meet you, ma'am. Now, while you wash up, I'm going to get some clothes that my boy outgrown a while ago. Barely been used. So when you get dressed, you come on down and we'll eat. You chose a great day to visit. We're having a very special breakfast today. Pancakes, sausage, and toast, and a big glass of orange juice. You can meet Scott and Kim, too. How's that sound? That sounds real good, ma'am. Thank you very much. Don't mention it. It's a pleasure to have such a well-mannered young visitor. Mrs. Lee and Lefty Lewis left the room. As soon as they were a little bit down the hall, I could hear her start in on scolding her father again. I just can't believe it, Mama was right about you. All I could hear next was him mumbling some answer, then her slapping his arm again. All right, so we're going to stop right there, and we're just going to have quick little chats before this ends. So we're not going to finish chapter 11 today. No big deal. But we're just going to do a little recap on what's happening in Mr. Bud's life. So he was with Lefty Lewis, almost scared Lefty Lewis to death because he almost drove away with the blood. Mr. Lefty Lewis must be some type of blood, like, messenger, okay? He's like the mailman, but with blood for stuff, okay? Secondly, he must have fallen asleep in the car when he woke up. He woke up at Miss Sleet's house, which is Lefty Lewis's daughter, and they're about to have food. And he's apparently still looking awful from all those not mosquito bites, all those hornet bites and all that stuff like that. So you do not have a homework assignment today. Don't get off yet. There will be no homework assignment today. Tomorrow, we're going to finish chapter 11, and then you'll have a small assignment. And then on Friday, you're going to have a read works, okay? So tomorrow we will finish chapter 11 together. Don't finish it yourself because we got to read it together. Give me thumbs up, thumbs down. How are we feeling about this story today? I'm telling you, I just love this book. I think it's so good. It just cracks me up.
It makes me so nervous.
There's a lot of suspense sometimes, like it's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? That's why I like it. Like it makes me want to keep on reading it, which is why I think it's so good. Mm-hmm. So like I said, no assignment tonight, or today, hopefully if everyone's almost here except for maybe 2 or 3 people. So if you're one of those people that aren't with me live, you better make sure you finish the whole chapter. Well, the whole thing. So anyways, this was a lovely time. Math RTI in 3 minutes. No, I lied. In 13 minutes. So I will see you guys in Math RTI. And if you're in my Math RTI, if you're not in my Math RTI, I will see you in
Don't we have to label all the chapters?
Yeah, make sure you're labeling the chapters, friends. Thank you so much for reminding me, Molly. Remember, when we finish this book, the day after we finish this book, you have to turn in all those chapter titles. So remember, the chapters are just numbers. You need to be labeling them with titles, okay? So long, farewell. You're free to leave. See you in Math RTI.